Uh, on this blustery day up here in 1511, the Lakeview Towers, it's cheery inside, but the wind is blowing outside.
Oh,
it's quite cold.
dreadful.
And the day following Washington's birthday, and it's probably the last gasp of winter here in Oklahoma City, don't you think so, Mrs. Bloch?
Yes, but we've had a beautiful winter, so we'll have to have a little of the bad weather.
Oh, you have to.
It won't last long.
It will make us appreciate those hot summers, or the hot summer coming up.
You're so right. It's very nice of you to come out on such a day, particularly when I have so little to offer in return.
Well, as you probably know from the contact with Dr. Baird and the correspondence, what we're going to discuss becomes a part of what Oklahoma Christian College calls their Living Legend Library. It unquestionably is the first in this area and probably in the Southwest, and one of the a step into the future to record the happenings in and around Oklahoma City that affected you and Mr. Bloch and your family in the early days. And we say that advisedly because there has to be a start to something, and you did come from somewhere.
Yes, indeed. I have lived here 56 years, and if he were living, he 5 years earlier. So, you know, we have seen Oklahoma City grow.
Now, you came from where, Mrs.
Houston, Texas, where I was born and reared.
We do have something in common there, too. My brother was born in Houston.
Well, my brother still lives there, and he's General Maurice Hirsch, and he's head of the symphony there in Houston. He's the president.
I see.
So
and your name was Hirsch?
Hirsch. Josie Hirsch.
Now, did you come here as a bride?
As a bride, yes.
And with Mr. Bloch?
That's right.
And his name was?
Jules, Jules, and he was born and reared in Franklin, Louisiana.
Why did he come here?
Well, Franklin was a very small place. And he decided to go west.
Yeah.
And he looked at Guthrie and Tulsa and Oklahoma City and fell in love with Oklahoma City. And he had very little, but the main street was one block. And he had to pay, I don't recall whether he said $5,000 or $10,000 for his location. Entirely different than it is today. And that practically took what he had to get a place to open business. At that time, he was in the clothing business.
In the clothing business.
And it was one block.
The downtown area.
Downtown. That was between Robertson and Broadway.
And he bought a store in there.
He had to buy
the location.
The location.
What was, you recall what was on either side? Or in the vicinity there?
Well, it was near the Criterion Theater. But of course, I wasn't here when he first opened, and then later on he went into finance. But, and business was terrific. On Saturday nights, they remained open until about midnight. And there were all the gold pieces, and there were quite a few, because I was patient enough to wait up for him. He gave me all the gold pieces.
Oh, isn't that?
Well, of course, I saved them until the government called them in, and then I have no more gold pieces or gold. But gold was quite a usual transaction, and certainly silver dollars.
Well, it was commonplace in those days,
yes,
wasn't it?
definitely.
As a means of exchange. So you came here as a bride, and at that time, Mr. Bloch was in the clothing business.
That's correct.
You recall where you lived? Sure you do.
Yes, first we were at the Huckins Hotel, which was the fine hotel. Then they had a fire, and we had to go through the freight elevator for quite a long time, and then we bought a home on 18th Street, which was very far out.
That was out in the country then, wasn't it?
That's right. And then eventually when we went to Nichols Hills, that was very far out. But we keep getting...
How long was he in the clothing business?
Oh, I imagine about 10 years, something like that.
And then he went into the
finance. And he was director of the old Security National Bank and of the First National Bank. And he was on the planning board here. And had to get off, of course, when we moved to Nichols Hills. But we couldn't walk down the street without everyone saying hello, just like with my son. Naturally, my son was born and reared here, and in Oklahoma City at that time, where it was a smaller population.
Well, did your son carry on the finance business?
No, he's a geologist.
He is a geologist.
That's right.
I'll bet as a young bride, you were kept pretty busy in those days, weren't you, and having a lot of fun?
Yes, and the terrible part of it is, being a Southerner, and my mother born in Mobile, Alabama, I didn't know anything about cooking except Welsh rarebit and fudge. So I would engage these maids, and in the early days they knew nothing. And I'd phone to my husband, and I'd say, "Oh, I engaged the most beautiful girl." And he'd say, "Well, darling, can they cook?" I said, "Well, we'll have to try them out." I always loved duty around me, and that was more important to me than if they could cook. But it wasn't that important to him. But that's really funny.
He sounded like he was a lot of fun.
Well, he was a grand man. The people who recall him just loved him. He was a real gentleman and a very
real nice
handsome
things
man.
about him, and a lot of people that knew him naturally.
Well, he was a
coming
man
from you would naturally
who
know.
brought home always sweetness. He had many times reverses, but he would always handle them beautifully and never try to make me discouraged, and yet shared his experiences with me, which I think is wonderful. I think a wife who knows nothing about her husband's affairs is just an idiot.
Well, she misses a great deal, doesn't
But the nice part of it is, oh, now, what are we going to do?
That's all right. Go ahead and answer the phone.
Can you cut that off?
Doesn't bother us at all.
I don't know where we were, but it's all right.
Oh, we were discussing...
Well, Oklahoma City at that time, 18th Street was way out. And when I first came here, even 13th Street was far out. And then I joined the music club right away. It had just been organized. And we had a very rigid examination, because it was only active members.
Right.
And I had to appear before a board. And then I was on this first program. And it's been my real hobby ever since. And it's through the latest music club that we really have a symphony. There were only, it's even mentioned the names in here, when we organized and decided to go to have an orchestra. And there were only 14 of us. I think 14, and here they are right here.
Oh, for heaven's sake. Now this was
That was on our
organized.
50th anniversary is when that little thing came out about the club members.
Well, let's see here. We can find...
Well,
Ladies Music Club of Oklahoma City was organized back in 1908.
That's right.
I see Mrs. Frank Buttram was one of the...
Oh, yes. Well, she wasn't
No.
here when we organized, but she became very, very active. In fact, we owe so much to Miss Buttram.
Attending the organizational meeting, officers and board members, including Mrs. Frederick Owen, Mrs. Jules Bloch, Mrs. Edie Ferguson, Mrs. C.A. Griffith, Mrs. A.C. Scott, Mrs. A.L. Welch, Mrs. A.C. Bennett, Mrs. W.F. Wilson, Mrs. Charles N. Thacker, Mrs. Vose, R.A. Vose, Mrs. Charles E. Jackson, Mrs. Joseph Huckins, Mrs. Prentice Price, and Mrs. W.C. Newland of New York. Well, this is interesting. The first public concert was given on May 24th, 1924.
That's
It was organized in 1908. Now, I know that you ladies were busy. What did you have in mind when you organized the club?
Well, we organized the club. We just played for one another in Mrs. Ames' ballroom. And then we wanted to bring concert artists. Quite a few managers who tried to bring people became very discouraged. And some years we'd have them bring one or two artists, and most of the time we had none. And we would get out and sell tickets. We had no associate membership at the time, just the 15 of us. And we would go to the merchants, and for Schumann Hike, I can remember getting out there and working, and the people that we've had have been the outstanding, great ones. Pavlova and Francis Alder and Chrysler and Madame Schumann Hike and Mary Garden and, well, I can't, Gladys Rothart, all the great names.
Well, where would an artist like that perform back in those days?
Oh, my Lord. Sometimes we had them at the
Hotel at the Hutton?
the Coliseum, where the horses were, out at cattle, wherever you call
Stockyard City.
Stockyards. And then, let's see, then we'd have it at the OCU wasn't built then,
Yes, ma'am.
We'd have, I can't even remember. I think at the Huckins in the ballroom there. And that's about it. But oh no, I'm taking it back. On Sheridan, which was Grand Avenue,
Yes.
that theater, that was the big thing there.
Oh, the old Warner Theater?
The old Warner Theater. We had the Warner Theater there. And we had many of our
That had
concerts
just
there.
been taken down. Right?
That's right. And that's where we had most of our concerts. And we were very formal. We dressed very as though we were going to opera.
Yes.
And it was a very lovely thing. And then I felt that the young people here were not having advantages. And I started the Junior McDowell Club, and also had the young members of Our Ladies Music Club to be allowed the privilege of being members of the music club as well as attending all our artist concerts. And that started that.
What was the McDowell Club?
Well, the McDowell Club of Allied Arts. That was formed almost as early as this. Harold Florence Long was the one who sponsored the senior one. And that's very active here in the city. You know, it's the Allied Arts, the drama and the music and the painting. And then I was the sponsor of the junior. And they're very active today. And Mrs. McDowell she's visited here, I imagine, maybe 4 different times. She was a guest once in my home, which was a great privilege, because she was a lovely lady with a tremendous understanding of young people.
It must be amazing to a lot of many people, say from other sections of the country, who, if they were given the opportunity, or if they took the time to delve into the history of Oklahoma City, although it became, it was a city almost instantly, instant cities in those days, because of the run and so forth.
Let's let it go.
What a breadth of culture there was in those days. Go right ahead, that's all right.
I hate to interfere with you. Early days, it was very difficult to get an accompanist and expensive for some of the school children.
Yes.
And at Harding and Wilson, I volunteered my time, and I accompanied any of the children who couldn't afford an accompanist.
Well,
and then for years, I gave this medal to the one who, both Harding and Wilson, to the children who made the greatest progress in music. You know, they used to, they formerly had this for art and for literature and French and all that, and I gave mine for music. And then the Sunbeam Home has changed a great deal. They have broadened out. I was on that board for a while. And anything with children, that's the thing that interests me. The old folks, they have to manage, if they have comfortable shoes at my age.
Well, you were interested in children and music.
Interested in children and music.
Right.
I like art, but that's not my forte.
Well, didn't you feel in your travels, as you and Mr. Bloch got around, that a lot of people really didn't have an idea that Oklahoma City had the depth of culture, even in the early days?
My dear, the most amazing thing, they called us Oklahoma, and they thought we were all Indians. And for instance, now this shouldn't be in this, but when my son-in-law, someone wanted to introduce him to my daughter, and said she was from Oklahoma, he said, "Count me out. I don't want to meet a girl from Oklahoma."
Isn't that amazing?
That's how we rated, you know. Oh, I'm so.
Well, sure, you're busy.
Well, calling off things, which is much better. I also recall when Dr. Nichols wanted to exchange the Crown Hill, you know, that Crown Heights, we had our country club there, for our Nichols Hills Country Club. What an effort, and how many thought it was a terrible thing to go way out of the woods to go to Nichols Hills. And that's when he developed Crown Heights. He took over our old country club and built this Nichols Hills Country
Crown
Club.
Heights formerly was the original
country
Oklahoma
club.
City Golf and Country Club.
That's right. And then we exchanged that, and he built this clubhouse for us.
Oh, I see.
And I don't remember what the cash was involved, But that's how we happened to get out to Nichols Hills, and I'll tell you, it took the forward-looking man to recognize that the city was growing in that direction. And we were, later on, all of us...
I suspect it would, because it was in the wilderness, wasn't it?
Yes. In fact, you know, Dr. Nichols planted the trees out here and everything. There weren't too many trees. He had to plant the trees. And really, and the sad part of it is, it was the time just before the Depression. And it was a long time in finding...
I can picture now Crown Heights, because it is so hilly, and through there it would make a wonderful golf course.
It was a beautiful country club, and, you know, a real country club. And, but I can remember how you had to fight anything that was different and way out. At that time, people weren't as willing to travel miles to get to where they wanted to go.
No, it's absolutely necessary.
Oh, yes.
How long did you stay on 18th Street?
I think about 2 years, and then we bought a home on 19th Street, and then Nichols Hills, so I've had 3 homes.
Where did you live in Nichols Hills?
1901 Bedford Drive. I'm just catty-corner to Dean McGee.
Oh, yes.
It's a lovely home.
That's wonderful.
And we had a wonderful time there.
I'll bet you did.
But after all, when you reach a certain age, the material things aren't too important, and you just want the comfort and the ease of living. And that's why I'm very happy being here.
Well, you have a nice high spot here in Lakeview Towers.
Oh, and I can tell you that when I get blue in the night and go out on that terrace and look at the city, and in the day my lake, as I call it. Don't know how Judge Hefner would like me to call it my lake, but I do.
I don't think he'd mind.
But you know, when I came here, there were no lakes at all. And that's what I miss so much, because around Houston, you know, we could go to Galveston and Morgan's Point and places like that. And to think today, Oklahoma, I think we have about as many lakes as Minnesota. And do you know that?
We're doing quite well, as a matter of fact, through the foresightedness of some of our people that we've had here in Oklahoma.
That's right.
I say our people because I feel like an adopted Oklahoman after about 5-6 years.
Definitely.
A wonderful progress in water conservation that's been made.
That's wonderful.
And the determined effort that Senator Kerr made in that respect.
Oh, definitely. And of course, even before that, we were having these lakes and ponds. And that's a wonderful thing, because when I came here, really, Oklahoma was really barren. I can recall when this friend of mine gave me some crawling honeysuckles. I thought that was the most generous, you know, those, whatever you call it. Because at home in Houston, we had the most beautiful sort of a garden with the oak trees and moss and whole block of beautiful roses and everything. And there were very few landscape gardens here then.
When was the first orchestra organized here? Do you recall?
Well, that was it. Right here at that time, we had started in having a sort of a quartet. And they did so beautifully. And it tells right here, let's see, in one of these things, that's why I got this there.
Oh, yes, in 1924, wasn't it?
1924. And that was when we had a choir, and then a band, and then a string choir. And that's when we decided it was so successful that we'd start an orchestra. And we had Dean Hamburg from Norman. He was our first conductor. And then we had Ralph Rose. And then we had Alessandro, and then our wonderful conductor today, Dr. Harrison.
Dr. Harrison's been here quite a spell, hasn't he?
Well, I imagine maybe 8 or 10 years. I don't know. The years pass so quickly, I can't.
He's done very well.
But he's made a very fine name for himself, and he's given us a good organization. We're quite thrilled to have him and feel quite privileged.
Well, the arts and culture and so forth.
And then to have our art gallery, our art center that the St. Patrick gave us, that in itself is a great thing.
Now we have that plus the foundation, which is
that's wonderful.
Magnificent.
And then the planetarium. And we're kind of middle age now.
You ladies worked rather diligently back in those days.
Oh, we had to, because We had to do it ourselves. We didn't have too much advertising. We had very little money. And it was all effort and enthusiasm. That's all I can say.
Well, there was the will to do it.
And so many of us came from communities and homes where we had these experiences. And we realized how barren life would be here without them. And that's why we did it. For our own selves and for our children and for our friends.
Well, actually, as a part of the history of the city, it started out with something other than just being the result of the run in a cow town. It started out with art culture at the same time, even though many people don't realize that.
That's right. Of course, we had all kinds. We must remember that, too.
It takes all kinds, doesn't it?
That's why life is interesting.
Did you and Mr. Bloch, later on, as you get a chance to travel considerably?
Oh, we've traveled a lot. And he always said he'd rather have the memory than that much money left in the bank. And he accomplished what he wanted, because we took trips, and I wondered now, because we reared our 2 children and a nephew. But we had this maid who was in our family for 44 years, and she came to me after I lost my mother. A white, educated woman. And we could leave our children with her. But we did. And then if we saved up a little, we had a trip.
Oh,
and I still do it. I'm leaving on that symphony tour on the 18th.
Oh, you're going on? That's marvelous. That should be an interesting tour.
Well, I've been to all these places, some 2 or 3 times, but there we are again.
They're not going to get you out of here tonight, are they?
Oh, I'm not going, and it was a dinner party, but she's very understanding. I knew they'd call if I didn't get to them. Well, is there anything else you'd like to know? I could offer so little, except to see this wonderful community, and
quite a few changes, right?
Oh, my. We live in Oklahoma, those who've been here as long as I've been, a few longer. We've had about the equivalent of 3 generations, like in Boston, up to now. Of course, Boston is changing very quickly now. But until a very few years ago, it would have taken about 3 generations to have encompassed the changes that we've had here in 1 generation.
Everyone that we have had an opportunity to talk with, and we're talking with practically everyone that we can, at least a minimum of 100, and putting them on the library, on the tape library, they all have evidenced this one feeling that at least I get the reflection, being on the other side of the microphone, that there was a real drive, not an uneasiness nor a nervousness, but a real concerted drive to move ahead, to do things.
Well, we were proud of this city. The beginnings were just our own. I mean, it's so individual. And I think we had the women, this maternal pride, and certainly the men, their paternal pride in making it as fine a city as we could. Some people could give of means, and some of dedication, of will and work. But people did contribute, and when you could really reach them, they did give a great deal. And we can be very grateful.
Well, apparently the public reacted.
Well, sometimes it was very hard. But we came through. Just like sometimes we have to have 2 and 3 votes to pass a bond.
Right.
But it takes time. But that isn't just Oklahoma City, that's everywhere.
Was it difficult in the music approach? Was it difficult to get the symphony going, to really get it accepted?
Well, I'm not going to say it was easy, but we did it. You know, it's that when you're young and enthusiastic, now looking back, it seems much harder than I thought it was then. It is a difference.
Yes, ma'am, that's true.
So at that time, I just took it all in the stride. I knew it was to be, and that was it. Today, when I look back, I think, oh, the nerve that we had. Like, we'd engaged these artists, and we didn't know whether we had to stand responsible, you know.
Yeah.
That if we couldn't pay them, we personally would have to guarantee it. And we did with these wonderful artists, and I don't recall once of having to go into my own pocket.
Well, you had no inhibitions in those days.
No, you know, after all, this was a frontier city, and you just had that spirit. You weren't conservative. You just wanted something and it was worthwhile doing, and you did it. It's really wonderful because so many people came, like these southern cities that were old, like when I think of the environment I had as a little girl, my mother from Mobile, you know, born there, and they're very conservative.
Extremely so.
And then to come out here where, of course, I was young enough to change my attitude.
Quite a challenge, wasn't it?
Well, yes, but I didn't have to go through what a lot of people did in the early days, where they had these storms where the red mud would go into their homes, and it would take them 2 and 3 days to wash their homes. It would come in through the windows and doors. They had the red mud, and I didn't have that. I wasn't one of these very hardship pioneers.
You're more fortunate than
That's
than
right. I wasn't that early.
Uh-huh.
But I've heard some of these people talk about these storms where the red mud, where you couldn't see it, and these houses were not particularly well built, except a few.
How do you think we stand now in the music facet of our city?
I'm really very happy.
You're really pleased with it?
Oh yes, it's far beyond what I'd expected, because we have quartets, and I think, but OCU, I can remember when they started out, they didn't have enough money to pay their professors, and now to see their growth and their influence, and then of course OU is a marvelous university today, and at that time it was just a small
school.
Really. And so this, as far as growth is concerned, we're in the very center of the United States. I don't see any reason in the world why we can't keep on growing and achieving anything that we desire.
Have you noticed an increased, other than brought about by the increase in population, have you noticed an intensifying of the interest in music and the
definitely.
orchestra and so forth?
When you go to the concerts and you see these people, these foreign students, and of course we have quite an influx of people from the East and the West, and I find that they're quite an educated, cultivated group. And I think our music and our art centers and opportunities have just brought in these people and made them feel much more at home than they would otherwise. I don't even know if they'd want to come here otherwise.
It's an important facet to attract people's attention and their interest, isn't it?
Well, I know that these young cities, we were just supposed to be money mad, and that was all. And I'm just delighted with it. I love Oklahoma City because I could live most anywhere, and my husband could have too for many years. But
you chose to remain here, though.
Definitely. And my daughter doesn't quite understand it. She thinks I should go and live in Scarsdale, where she lives. But in the
your
East,
son is here, though.
My son, and he's a great joy to me, of course. And now this lovely daughter-in-law, I'm very pleased to live here, and my friends, and the interest and to watch them grow. I don't have to be too active in any of them today, and yet.
But you still participate greatly in the activities.
Oh, surely I do. But not like I formerly did, of course not. They don't need me really anymore. I just come and enjoy. A few of them have called me Bernard Baruch, the elder statesman.
I think that your influence is greatly felt. I'm quite sure of it.
No, don't flatter me like that. It's very minor in comparison.
Well,
to quite a few.
You had a hand in the beginning of it. Yes,
I came from a sort of an educated community. Even Houston, you know, was not considered very elegant in those days. You go east and then you talk about Houston, you know. Now today they feel entirely different.
Yes, they do. But it would appear that Oklahoma City is well on the way to becoming one of the great cities of the Southwest.
Oh, definitely. And if we had more drapers, Stanley drapers,
yes, if we could ever find the mold for some people like that,
and when you think,
some more.
Oh, it's wonderful. And we will. Look at Mr. McGee. He hasn't lived here so long, and look what he's done for our city. We've had some very wonderful people, and always someone comes. And as long as we can keep attracting people of that caliber, we're very fortunate.
Well, that seems to be just a continual thing on the part of not only the industry, but the arts and the cultures, industry, and the people themselves attracting other people.
You know, I think it's so wonderful of you. You have lived in so many cities and so many different locales. And to find so much to be enthusiastic about Oklahoma City.
Well,
and
frankly,
I think it's really
we were
wonderful.
enthused the day we came into the city, and I don't think we've ever lost that enthusiasm. It finds a deeper feeling as you go along.
Well,
It becomes deeply seated in you.
Well, I think that's wonderful. And really, I think that's most complimentary to our city. And thank you for all our citizens for feeling that way. We'll try to make your life very happy here.
Well, I hope so. But I know that the college is very grateful for you taking your time for this discussion. It will give the students and the workshops and the historians at least a different aspect and a particular facet in the history of Oklahoma City in which you participated.
Well, I wouldn't feel a bit disappointed or surprised if you cut out practically everything.
Well, you can be sure
because
that
what I have said is so insignificant in comparison with the growth of Oklahoma City. But as long as you asked me to, I wouldn't say no.
It's amazing. One page, for instance, in a large volume, it would not be complete without that one page.
Oh, well, this time it would be quite complete.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Bloch.
Well, it's a pleasure to be with you, and thank you.